Welcome to the Daily Insider here on VegasInsider.com. I am Kevin Rogers. Thursday, October 14th, 2021. And we're going to talk to Vince Akins, the NFL money leader at VegasInsider.com, in just a moment. What a night we have. Buccaneers-Eagles, Thursday night football to kick off week 6. 2 college games. Game 5 between the Giants and Dodgers. The winner faces the Braves in the NLCS. The loser with over 100 wins goes home after tonight. Full slate of hockey. So a lot going on around the sports betting world. And I'll tell you something, very, very excited about this. Now we're hitting it in high gear, middle of October with everything going on. And next week, the NBA is going to start. So there's a lot of things to look at. But before we get to Vince Akins, I want to tell you about BetMGM. They are the king of sportsbooks. And right now, the offer that's going on at BetMGM, bet $10 to win $200 if your team scores a touchdown. That's right. If you are a new customer, you can win this. When I say this, $200 if your team scores a touchdown. Now, remember, you have to be 21 years or older to be eligible for this. And also, you have to be in a legal betting state. And you see on the bottom, New Jersey, Colorado, Indiana, West Virginia, Tennessee, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Virginia, Iowa, Washington, D.C., and Arizona. And again, terms and conditions do apply. Bet on any NFL money line. And if your team scores a touchdown, you'll receive an additional $200 in free bets. That is at BetMGM. And they are the king of sportsbooks. Well, terrible transition, but I guess I'll say he's the king of the NFL right now. It's Vince Akins. And you know what? You look at his record right now. Vince joins us every Thursday. He's 30-14 in the NFL, 68% on VegasInsider.com, plus 1460 units. So he is rocking and rolling. And look, I mean, there's not a lot more to say than that, Vince. But you're doing a pretty good job so far in the NFL. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'll lock in that 68% for the season. If I could hit that button right now and say 68% the whole way, let's do that. Because everything's been going quite well so far in the NFL.
And what is it? What are you seeing well now? I know you've always done well in the NFL, but what are you seeing well through the first 5 weeks?
Sure. I'd say the biggest thing is that there's been a lot of value in underdogs so far, and that showed the overall trend for the season, and then the things we've been looking at. So we'll see if that lasts. Sometimes there could be some buyback in the favorites coming this week. I think it's going to be just sort of looking ahead to what we have coming up. I think you're going to see a mix of favorites and underdogs in our plays this week. We play both. Things tend to lean a little more towards underdogs, but I think we're going to see a nice mix coming up here.
Let's look at tonight's NFL, Vince, and right out of the gate, Bucs Eagles, and you have Week 6 kicking off. Tom Brady has not been good in prime time in Tampa Bay, or at least towards the end of his tenure in New England as well. So we'll see if he could break that hex tonight, at least from an ATS standpoint. And the Eagles off a good win at Carolina last week. They were down for a lot of that game, and then they woke up in the second half. But Tampa Bay laying 7 at Philadelphia. What trends did you uncover for this game tonight?
Sure. A couple things here. First, what I want to mention is one, just because I mentioned it last week as well when we were looking at Rams, Seahawks. But home dogs on Thursday nights have not performed all that well. This goes back to 2004. Just 27, 44, and 3 now against the spread in Thursday night games. So I know some people think, home dog, primetime crowd, short rest, that might be an extra edge. It really hasn't been for the home teams going back long term here. And the other thing I pulled up here, a very interesting team trend, and this looks at the total now. It doesn't go back that far. We're only going back to November 2017. The Eagles have gone under 17 straight times since November 2017 at home. Totals under 54. And they're facing a team allowing at least 21 points per game. So allowing something, generally speaking, that number 21, at least close to league average, or right around league average or more points per game allowed. The Bucs allowing 24.4 points per game. Obviously, they haven't Well, they have a solid defense. That's not necessarily the strength of the team. They're looking to outscore teams, but the Eagles have consistently gone under at home in these situations the last few years.
So I do like that trend, though. Home dogs, 27, 44, and 3 ATS on Thursday night since 04. And we saw last week, like you mentioned, the Seahawks closed as an underdog. And again, Russell Wilson got hurt. But regardless, the Rams ended up winning that game. So we'll see if we'll see which one continues. We'll see if Tom Brady continues to struggle in primetime or if the home dog on Thursday night trend continues. But we have that in Thursday night football on the NFL side. The college side, Vince, Navy and Memphis. And I find this one so intriguing in the American tonight because Navy's covered 3 in a row. They're competitive. Memphis has lost 3 straight, but during the stretch, they blew a 21-0 lead to Texas San Antonio, lost in the last-second field goal, up 17-0 at Temple, blew that game and lost, outgained Tulsa last week and lost. So what gives here if Memphis can turn it around against Navy?
Yeah, one thing I think that's really interesting to look at here will be the pace and the total plays run. Memphis last week ran a crazy 99 plays in that regulation loss to Tulsa. You're not going to see many college games where 99 plays are run in a regulation. Compare that to Navy. I didn't look this up. I venture to say Navy may never have had 99 plays run against them by an opponent based on how they control the clock in their games. But you think about Memphis sort of long term as being a team that's that runs a higher volume of plays, sort of a high volume team. Looking back to October 2015, Memphis is actually 0-10 against the spread coming off a game where they ran at least 84 plays. So you might think for Memphis, getting that tempo going, get that number of plays on offense has been a good thing. But going forward, it has not been for them. And that essentially 99 is right at the top echelon of the number of plays they've run. But in the last few years, that's not necessarily been a benefit for them going forward to the next game.
Yeah, and that's now 4 straight games, Vince, that Navy is a double-digit underdog, and they've covered the first 3. They beat UCF outright. They also covered against Houston, covered against SMU in losses, and a lot of these American teams, we know that they like to throw the ball over the place. That Navy's the only one that really is running the ball, and everyone else is throwing it around. But Navy's hung around the last few weeks, so we'll see if that continues coming up tonight. Now let's go to Saturday. And let's look ahead to Kentucky and Georgia. And both these teams undefeated, but obviously, you look at the Bulldogs, number 1, they've crushed everyone. Kentucky, really good home win a few weeks ago against Florida. They beat up LSU last week. Now let's see if they could do this again. They've hung with Georgia, Vince, the last few seasons, but you think that Kentucky can hang around here against the Bulldogs?
Yeah, we have some mixed trends. Looking at this game. So I'm going to point out a couple of things on both sides here. Start with maybe one of the more obvious ones, just looking straight up. Kentucky has played 16 games against teams ranked in the top 8 going back to 2008, and they've lost all 16 of those. In the last few years, they've played 6 games going back to 2016, haven't scored more than 17 points in any of those games. Which is not really anything unexpected there, but just to point out that Kentucky doesn't really have the track record of the major upset. And as the 11th ranked team, you might not think that this is a huge upset, but then you look at that line, 22.5 points right now. So that's really rare territory when we're talking about a team ranked this high, getting this many points. So looking at that, since 2012, teams that are in the top 20 in the AP poll, which Kentucky is comfortably at, have been more than 21-point dogs in games. Those teams are 0-6-1 against the spread. Teams in the top 12 have only been in this situation twice, actually all the way back to 2006, where we track as far as AP rankings go. Only twice has teams in the top 12 been more than 21-point dogs, and both those teams failed to cover in that game as well. Also, I talked about that 0-6-1 against the spread. 6 of those 7 games hit under as well, so lower scoring games. Is generally speaking, obviously this is a low total, so we're already accounting for some of that. But generally speaking, these teams that are ranked that are such huge underdogs are expected to be really stifled on offense, and that has been the case. An interesting thing now, looking at something a little more positive for Kentucky, a couple of those, looking at their individual team trends. So there's been a real dichotomy between coming off a game as a favorite and coming off a game as a dog for Kentucky. This goes back to November 2017, when they're coming off a game as a favorite, which they were last week. They were small favorites against LSU in that nice win, 19-3 against the spread, coming off a game as a favorite. Compare that to coming off games as a dog over that same time, just 4-14-1 against the spread. So, if you want to think about some reasoning of that, games where they have an edge that are maybe a little less physical, not the same level of competition, they've succeeded coming off those games compared to games where they were underdogs and really had to scrap. I'll point out a final thing about the game because Kentucky ran all over LSU last week, 330 rushing yards on the ground. Since October 2016, Kentucky is a dog of less than 31 points off a home game where they ran for at least 200 yards, 13-0 against the spread in that time frame. So, if you think they're going to, how much they can actually establish the run against Georgia remains to be seen. But the fact that they are coming in, having run the ball well, is a positive for Kentucky, particularly as a game where they're dogs, and that might be a way for them to bleed the clock, keep things a little closer when you look at a big line like this.
Yeah, it's very intriguing, this line, simply because Georgia, we see what they've done all season long, and you're just waiting for someone to really compete with them. Clemson hung with them in the opener, but now we see how bad Clemson's offense has been. But Kentucky, they keep doing it every week. But again, major step up in class for Kentucky, and we'll see if they hang around in this one. And if they win this game, somehow they would be in the driver's seat to be in the SEC championship. So, who would ever think that? Basketball, maybe, but not football. Now let's stay in the SEC. And the world was made a better place on Saturday as Alabama lost finally, as Texas A&M got them. And now the Crimson Tide, they head to Starkville to take on the Pirate, Mike Leach. Alabama laying 17 in this one. Vince, what do you have on it?
Yeah, well, this was too intriguing of a situation not to put on our sheet for this week, just because of how rare Alabama losses are. So looking at Alabama off a loss, obviously you're not looking at a large sample size there. But going back to 2017, coming off a loss, playing next game, they are 3-0 against the spread. Going back all the way to 2014, coming off a loss, Alabama's next games, all 5 of those have gone under the total. So think about some of their recent losses and what they've done to correct it. Been lower scoring next games. Also interesting, I decided to look at number 1 teams that were ranked number 1 last week coming off a loss. And that's actually interesting. Only happened 3 times since 2014. Actually, more often when the number 1 ranking is flipped, it's just been 2 teams that have won last week or a team was idle, and that's when the rankings flipped. But number 1 team, I said, lost 3 times since 2014, obviously before bowl season. I'm talking about games where they have a next opponent. All 3 of those teams covered by at least 11 points the next game. So you might expect this to be kind of a downtrodden scenario. Recent teams that were number 1 coming off a loss have actually gone the opposite way and really have exceeded expectations their next game.
Yeah, and again, Alabama, we know what kind of machine they are. They almost came back to beat Texas A&M when they looked dead in the water on Saturday night, but then A&M tied it and then kicked the game-winning field goal. So now we'll see what Nick Saban and the Crimson Tide do here in a major bounce-back spot. Everything's wide open in the college football playoff this year. So, again, Alabama not done yet, but they can't afford another slip-up on the road. Now let's move, Vince, to the NFL on Sunday. And Cardinals and the Browns. Arizona, the last undefeated team in the National Football League at 5-0. Cleveland, they lost that shootout to the Chargers last week, back and forth, but now they return home, and you don't see a lot of 5-0 teams as an underdog, so the Browns and the Cardinals coming up on Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the first thing I looked up for you for this game. Undefeated underdogs of at least 5-0 on the season. This goes back 30-plus years. They are 11-8-1 against the spread. So actually nothing all that interesting there. And I'll point that out because you'll actually see, I wouldn't be surprised if you're looking at some different things. You see some arguments either way, either that oh my gosh, an undefeated underdog this late in the season, it's got to be a value, or oh my gosh, an undefeated underdog this late in the season, there's got to be something that Vegas knows that the record doesn't show. There's a value playing against it. Historically, neither of those things have been true. With 11-8-1. Record, you're looking right at about 500. So just something to keep in mind. And I like to point out things like this once in a while. What we're talking here, I'm talking mainly about trends and systems that there's a side to play, advantage one side or the other. But a lot of time, many of the things that I'm searching, ultimately you'll see records such as this, and those get skipped and don't end up in recaps like this. But there's a lot of situations that are interesting, but ultimately against the spread, over under records end up around 500. One situation in this game, another one that's a little unique that's more interesting is, you mentioned the Browns last week coming off that extreme shootout loss to the Chargers where they scored 42 points. So looking at teams that scored more than 38 points last game and lost, those teams are 20-8 against the spread, historically going back over that same time frame. Interestingly, the last time this was active was last season, Week 15, with the Browns coming off a kind of a similar shootout loss to the Ravens on Monday night. Everyone remembers that game as well. They went to face the Giants next week on Sunday Night Football and picked up a pretty commanding victory there.
Yeah, and again, you're right. That's what everyone's thinking going to this game, that Arizona's obviously not going to be favored on the road at Cleveland. Cleveland's too good of a team to be a home underdog to Arizona. But then you kind of wonder, okay, Cleveland is laying 3 here. Cliff Kingsbury's been a very good road underdog in his career since he became the head coach of the Cardinals. Everyone kind of frowned upon him being the coach, but yet he's been money as a road underdog. They won at Tennessee earlier this year. We saw what they did to the Rams. So it's not crazy, but again, it's one of those games. Do you want to go against the undefeated team, or do you say, all right, maybe this is the time that Arizona finally loses a game?
Yeah, and there's some interesting team stuff on both sides of this equation as well. You have Arizona obviously traveling cross country off a big win. Honestly, last week, I thought Arizona was a little overvalued going into that game. They still managed to cover against the 49ers. So it'll be interesting to see how Arizona can back up that performance coming off back-to-back, honestly, big wins over divisional teams, and now traveling across the country facing a non-conference opponent.
Now you have another situation, west to east, non-conference. Seattle goes to Pittsburgh Sunday night. I'm sure NBC is not thrilled about this matchup because Russell Wilson's out. You have Geno Smith in. But any value in the Seahawks? Both teams are 2-3. Pittsburgh finally ended their losing streak last week. They held off Denver at home. Now the Steelers flipped to a favorite where they're 0-2 straight up in ATS this season. Vince, your thoughts on this and what you found with the Steelers and Seahawks Sunday night?
Yeah, I'm sure NBC would have loved flex scheduling to be in place for that game. Honestly, that Arizona-Cleveland game, that's not even a national TV late game, probably would have looked good in this spot Sunday night. But a couple things looking at, we'll start with the Seahawks. And they have actually sort of a mixed record as a underdog this large. That wasn't worth either way, particularly all those games are basically Russell Wilson based as well. So there's nothing too interesting to glean from that. I do have a couple of interesting things on the Steelers side, actually. On this first one's a big one. I would, flash the trend of the week graphic here. So I look at Steelers coming off a home game since 2019. When they're coming off a home game where they scored at least 20 points, 12-0 against the spread. When they're coming off a home game where they scored fewer than 20 points over that same stretch, 0-6 against the spread. So that's really been the big difference. Coming off those home games last week, obviously they scored 26 points against Denver in that victory. How their offense performed coming off a home game has been a huge deciding factor is how their next game has gone. The other interesting thing about Pittsburgh here is they ran for 147 yards last week against Denver. That came a little bit out of the blue, to be honest. Pittsburgh has not established the run all that well this year. But so looking back, this goes back to November 2015. The Steelers off a home game, so they ran for at least 140 yards, 10-0 against the spread coming off that. So, Pittsburgh, it's been a little more rare the last year or two that they're coming off a big rushing game. But looking back the last 5-6 years under Mike Tomlin, when they have established a run at home, that has benefited them next game as well.
Yeah, and Pittsburgh, again, we'll see if you get the good Ben Roethlisberger or the not-so-good Ben Roethlisberger. Najee Harris had a good week last week. Juju Smith-Schuster, he's out for the season. So, again, that's hurting that passing game. But the X factor is Geno Smith. And I hate to say this, Vince, but Russell Wilson, for as good as he is, a top-flight quarterback, they weren't really winning with him early in the season. They were 2-2 before losing to the Rams. So I say, is it that crazy to say you look at Geno Smith and it's a huge downgrade? I mean, they weren't 4-0 with Russell Wilson in there either.
Yeah, it's interesting to consider where this line might have been with a Sunday night game if Russell Wilson was playing quarterback for the Seahawks. I suspect it would have been Steelers by 1, Steelers by 2, maybe up to 2.5. So you're definitely going to have a few extra points of value here if you believe in Geno Smith. Obviously, he looked pretty good for the half he played last week, but this is a different situation facing the Steelers defense, and a Steelers defense with a week to prepare for facing Geno Smith. So we'll just have to see if he can match that performance from the second half of last week.
Now, Vince, before I let you go, any thoughts on the baseball game tonight? Dodgers, Giants, winner take all, loser, pack it up and go home.
Sure. This is going to be an interesting one. Obviously, a good night for you all out there with multiple TVs. I know that's what I'll be doing this evening. I actually don't have a selection on this game tonight. We do on the NFL game, but I do have a couple of trends to mention. The first, the Dodgers. You have the line there's even. Looking at them as underdogs. They've been underdogs for much of the morning. That line's been flipping back and forth here a little bit. Dodgers have actually only played twice as underdogs the past 2 seasons. But looking back a little farther, going back to 2019, they're 0-5 in their last 5 games playing as an underdog, 2-13 in their last 15 games playing as an underdog. That takes us back to the 2018 season. So if that's something you're interested in, see where that line moves here as we get closer to first pitch. The other thing, looking at the total, this is something that I've actually used in the playoffs so far this season, not on tonight, but the Dodgers playing with a day of rest. So obviously off day yesterday. This goes back to July of this season. 12 straight unders for the Dodgers when they're pitching with a day of rest. And I think the bullpen is probably the main factor there. You think about the Dodgers being a little top heavy in the back end of that bullpen. Getting that day of rest for their pitchers has been huge, driving some lower scoring games recently. Obviously, we have a low total of 7 already tonight. But that's already hit a couple of times in the postseason, the wild card game and game 3 of this series, and is active again this evening.
Before I let you go, what are your thoughts on trying to handicap the playoffs with these starting pitchers that it feels like they're not going 6-7 innings, they're going like 3 innings, and it turns into a bullpen by committee, and it almost makes it impossible to handicap these starting pitchers because they go a few innings, give up 2 runs, and they're out, and now all of a sudden it's like all hell breaks loose.
Yeah, I'm having a pretty good MLB postseason so far. Thankfully, 10-3 on the season. There's a few different ways to consider that. We do look at some things based on how many strikeouts starters have had in recent games, how many innings they've pitched in recent games, to try to get an indication of what value there might be based on that starter going into the postseason. So there's some postseason-wide systems based on starters' recent performance or even how many starts they've made on the season that do have produced a little bit of value as far as trying to project those starters forward in these. There's one, for instance, in Walker Buehler, or even the top starters aren't necessarily going quite as far in the postseason here.
Vince Akins, you could check him out on VegasInsider.com. Top NFL handicapper right now. He's on fire in the NFL. So watch out for his picks for tonight and also for Sunday in the NFL. And always great work digging up the trends. Also, you can find his gridiron angles. Those are usually up on the site around Saturday. And he's got some good nuggets on some of the games around the NFL. Vince, thank you so much for joining us today, and best of luck. We'll talk to you next week.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right, there is Vince Akins, and he was breaking up a little bit there at the end, but number 1 NFL handicapper, VegasInsider.com. So you want to find a pretty good handicapper in the NFL. Look for Vince Akins, and he joins us every Thursday on the Daily Insider. So very happy to have him join us today. Now, want to tell you about DraftKings, and you could be the GOAT. Simple as that. You see the GOAT right there wearing the crown. It's the Sportsbook National Championship, and that is a $1 million prize. The tournament will be held in Weehawken, New Jersey. That's outside of New York City at the Enview Hotel, and that's coming up on Friday, November 5th. It's going to end Sunday, November 7th, and you could bet on 3 different sports, NBA, NFL, and college football. And the top prize is $1 million. And the buy-in, $10,000 for the tournament. Players receive a $5,000 bankroll for the weekend to use to place bets throughout the tournament by entering a $5,000 pool. And $1 million prize, over $2 million guaranteed in total prizes throughout the weekend. It is the DraftKings Sportsbook National Championship. You can be the GOAT if you win it all. Check it out today at DraftKings.com. So let's get back to the baseball game really quick for tonight, the Dodgers and the Giants. And Julio Urias on the mound for LA and Logan Webb for San Francisco. And Logan Webb totally shut down the Giants in shut down the Dodgers, in game one of the series at Oracle Park. And Webb had 10 strikeouts. He went deep into the game, and I would just hope that even tonight, if you see a low-scoring contest, that Urias and Webb can go deep in the game. That, both these guys go 6 innings-ish and then go to the bullpen, and not see you pitch 2 innings and then go to the bullpen for the rest of the game. It makes it very hard to handicap, no matter what. And we've seen that in a lot of these games so far in the postseason. I mean, Chris Sale went 1 inning in game 2 for the Red Sox. Red Sox ended up winning that game 14-6, and Sale gave up 5 runs. So there's been plenty of instances where a lot of these pitchers have not gone very deep, but we'll see if it turns around tonight. And you have a low total, but the Giants so far in their 2 wins over the Dodgers, they've shut out LA. So the Giants, if they get their pitching going, and Webb so far this year, the Giants are 4-0 in his 4 starts against LA. 3 of those games have gone under. And Urias has pitched well against San Francisco this year. LA's 13-0 his last 13 starts. So you're getting a great game. Yes, it's an elimination game before the NLCS, but still, it's going to be an excellent ball game tonight in San Francisco to close out the NLDS. I'm already looking ahead to NFL with Week 6 starting up, Tampa Bay and Philadelphia as they get going at Lincoln Financial Field tonight. And Tom Brady 0-6 against the spread in prime time since joining the Buccaneers, 3-3 straight up, all 3 wins by 3 points or less. And his thumb is not at 100% after he hit a helmet of a Dolphins defender in Tampa Bay's win last week against Miami. So now let's see how it turns out. I'm sure he'll be fine. He's Tom Brady. But the Bucs laying a touchdown here. And the favorites have won every game on Thursday Night Football this year. They haven't covered all of them, but they've won all of them. So we'll see if Philadelphia can buck that trend coming up tonight at Lincoln Financial Field. All right, before we get out of here, BetMGM, the king of sportsbooks, bet $10 to win $200 if your team scores a touchdown. This is for new players only, this promotion. Must be 21 years or older. Bet on any NFL money line, and if your team scores a touchdown, you'll receive an additional $200 in free bets. Must be 21 or older to play, and it is legal in the following states: Arizona, New Jersey, Indiana, Colorado, Tennessee, West Virginia, Iowa, Virginia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Washington, D.C. only. Full terms and conditions apply. It is BetMGM. They are the king of sportsbooks. Coming up tomorrow, Kyle Hunter is going to join us to talk college football, and he's one of the top handicappers in college this season on VegasInsider.com. Also, Paul Bovey, he will join us to talk NFL, and Paul has caught fire of late, so we'll talk plenty of college NFL on Friday to get you going for the weekend. And again, you have a lot of NHL tonight as well. A lot of teams playing their opener, and we saw last night home teams did very well inside of the NHL. And look, the home teams so far, the Lightning lost the opener to Pittsburgh, but Vegas beat Seattle on Tuesday night. And then last night, you had the Capitals, the Maple Leafs, the Avalanche, the Oilers, and the Ducks all won. And the Ducks were the only underdog to come through. They beat the Jets. They were up most of that game, or they were up basically the entire game over Winnipeg. So home teams have done very well. Now let's see if the road teams bounce back. Kraken, they go to Nashville to take on the Predators. The Penguins are in Sunrise to take on the Panthers. And the Panthers have big expectations this season inside the Atlantic Division. So we'll see if the Penguins pull off the Sunshine State sweep this evening. Also, the Rangers looking to bounce back at home. They host the Stars at Madison Square Garden. Golden Knights go to LA to face the Kings. So a lot of action tonight inside of the NHL to keep an eye on, and looking forward to that as well with the NFL, the college football, and the Game 5 in Major League Baseball. All right, thanks again to Vince Akins for joining me. You can check out his picks at VegasInsider.com. #1 NFL handicapper so far through the first 5 weeks. I am Kevin Rogers. Thanks a lot for watching this edition of the Daily Insider. If you missed any of it, you could find it on VegasInsider.com as well as on our YouTube channel. Also on our YouTube channel, we have the Buccaneers-Eagles best bet that I have on there for tonight. You can check that out as well. I am Kevin Rogers. Thanks a lot for tuning in, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow. And as always, best of luck with your bet.